The ship fell from the sky like a dying star. It burned through the clouds of Prime, leaving a trail of fire and smoke across the frozen mountains. When it hit the ground, the sound echoed through every valley and cave for 100 miles. Alpha heard it from his den. He gathered his hunters and ran through the snow to find the wreckage. The ship was not. It was small and strange, made of metals his people did not use. Most of it had burned. Bodies lay scattered in the snow, creatures had never seen before. They were small, soft, and hairless. They had no claws, no fangs. They looked weak like prey animals. His hunters wanted to leave. There was nothing here worth taking. The dead were dead, and the cold would claim what the fire had not. Then heard it, a small sound, a cry. He followed the sound into the broken ship. There, wrapped in strange fabric, was a baby. It was one of the soft creatures, but alive. It looked up with round eyes and reached for him with tiny fingers. Was the alpha of his pack. He had killed enemies with his bare claws. He had led his people through war and famine. He feared nothing in all the frozen moons. But when that tiny creature grabbed his finger, something in his chest moved. He carried the baby back to the den. His mate looked at the small thing with wonder and confusion. She had just given birth to their own cub, a strong male they named Bora. She asked what he wanted her to do with this creature. Told her to raise it as pack. The elders protested. This was not their way. The creature was not, it would not survive. It would be a burden. It would bring bad luck. Silenced them with a look. He was alpha, his word was law. They named the baby Hana, fed her alongside Bora and taught her to walk and speak. Hana grew slowly, much slower than cubs. While Bora was running and hunting by his second cycle, Hana was still learning to keep up. She was small. They stood 7 feet tall, covered in thick fur that protected them from the endless cold. Hana barely reached 4 feet by the time she stopped growing. Her skin was bare and soft. She needed special clothes to survive outside the warm dens. She had no claws for fighting, no fangs for tearing meat, no powerful legs for running through deep snow. Bora never let her forget it. From the moment they could speak, Bora made sure Hana knew she was different. She was weak. She was slow. She was not real pack. When they played hunting games, Bora always caught her first. When they practiced fighting, he knocked her down again and again. When they howled together under the moons, her voice was thin and wrong. The other cubs followed Bora's lead. They were not cruel exactly, but they saw Hana as less. A strange pet their alpha had adopted. Something to tolerate, not respect. Hana tried so hard to keep up. She ran until her legs burned. She practiced fighting until her body was covered in bruises. She tried to make her voice loud and strong. It was never enough. But Hana found other ways. They were warriors. They valued strength and speed and power above all things. They had little use for books or medicine or careful thinking. They solved problems with claws and fangs. Their history was kept in songs, and many of those songs had been forgotten over the generations. Hana could not be strong, so she became smart. She spent hours in the old chambers where the ancient texts were kept. No one else went there anymore. The writing was difficult, the language old, but Hana was patient. She learned to read the old words. She discovered stories and knowledge that the modern had forgotten. She learned medicine from the elderly healers who no one else would listen to. She learned which plants could heal wounds and which could stop infection. She learned how to set broken bones and treat fevers. She learned strategy from the old war texts, how to defend a position against greater numbers, how to use the land itself as a weapon, how to win without being the strongest. Watched her adopted daughter with pride and worry. She loved Hana as her own, but she knew the girl would never be accepted. Not truly. The pack respected strength, and Hana would never have that kind of strength. Saw something else. He watched Hana read the old texts and learn the forgotten knowledge. He watched her help the healers save cubs that would have died. He watched her think her way through problems that his warriors could only solve with violence. One night when Hana was in her 20th cycle, called her to his chamber. He was old now, gray in his fur, slow in his movements. He knew his time was ending. He told Hana something he had never told anyone else. He told her that strength was not only in claws and muscle. True strength was in the one who kept going when others stopped. True strength was in the one who found another way when the first way failed. He told her that she was Pac, real Pac, no matter what anyone said. Hana cried. She had waited her whole life to hear those words. 3 moons later, fell in battle against raiders from the outer systems. He died fighting, as an alpha should. The pack mourned him with howls that shook the mountains. Bora became the new alpha. He was everything a leader should be: strong, fast, fierce. His fur was silver like moonlight and his eyes burned with ambition. One of his first acts was to assign Hana to the nursery dens. She would care for the cubs. She would stay inside, away from the hunts and the councils and the important work of the pack. It was meant as an insult, a way to show her that she was nothing, that she would never be more than a servant. Hana accepted the assignment without complaint. She moved her few belongings to the small chamber near the nursery. She began her work with the cubs, the youngest and most vulnerable members of the pack. And she found something she had not expected. The cubs did not care that she was small and soft and different. They only knew that she was warm and kind and patient. She told them stories. She sang them songs. She held them when they were scared and cleaned them when they were sick. For the first time in her life, Hana felt like she belonged. Bora thought he was pushing her aside. Instead, he gave her something precious. He gave her the future of the pack. Hana looked at the 37 cubs in her care and made a silent promise. She would protect them, no matter what came, no matter what it cost. She was Pack, and Pack protected its own. 3 cycles passed. Bora proved himself a strong alpha. He led the pack to victory after victory. He expanded their territory. He made alliances with other packs. He took a mate named, a beautiful warrior with golden fur and fierce eyes. Soon she was carrying his cubs. The pack grew proud and confident under Bora's rule. They believed they could defeat any enemy. They believed nothing could threaten them. They were wrong. The first reports came from the outer settlements. Villages had been destroyed, not defeated in battle but completely destroyed. Every warrior killed, every elder slaughtered, every cub taken. The attackers left nothing behind but empty buildings and blood in the snow. Scouts brought back descriptions of the enemy. They were called the Scything Horde. Insect creatures, tall and thin, with hard shells like armor and blades instead of hands. They moved in swarms of hundreds. They showed no mercy and took no prisoners. They came from beyond the known systems, and no one knew why they had come to space. Bora gathered his finest warriors, 50 of the strongest fighters in the pack. He told them they would find this horde and destroy it. They would show these insects what happened when they attacked. Hana watched from the nursery entrance as the warriors prepared to leave. She saw the excitement in their eyes, the hunger for battle. She also saw something else. She saw how few warriors would remain to protect the den. She went to Bora before he left. She told him to be careful. She told him the old texts spoke of creatures like the horde, swarm hunters that used numbers and poison to overwhelm their prey. She told him to watch for traps. Bora laughed at her. What would a nursery keeper know about war? He told her to go back to her cubs and leave the fighting to real warriors. Hana said nothing more. She returned to the nursery and held the cubs close that night. The warriors left at dawn, stood at the gate and watched her mate disappear into the frozen mountains. Her belly was round with the cubs growing inside her. She would not see Bora again for many weeks. Hana kept the nursery running smoothly. The days passed, one after another. She taught the older cubs their letters. She sang songs to the younger ones. She helped stay comfortable as her pregnancy advanced. She waited for news. No news came. The elders grew worried. Messengers should have returned by now. Scouts should have brought reports, but the mountains were silent. No howls echoed from the passes. No runners appeared at the gates. Hana felt the fear growing in her chest. She tried to hide it from the cubs. She smiled and played with them during the day. But at night, she lay awake and stared at the ceiling of her small chamber. Something was wrong, she could feel it. The night it happened started like any other. Hana had just finished putting the youngest cubs to bed. She was tired but satisfied. The little ones had eaten well and were sleeping peacefully. She walked to her chamber, planning to read one of her old texts before sleeping. Then she heard the horn. It was the warning horn, the one that meant someone was approaching the den. Hana's heart jumped. She ran to the main hall where the elders were already gathering. The great gates groaned open. Snow blew in from the frozen night, and through that snow came a figure. It was Bora. He was alone. Hana did not recognize him at first. His silver fur was black with dried blood. His body was covered in wounds, deep cuts that still leaked red. His armor was torn and broken. His left arm ended at the elbow, the rest gone, the wound wrapped in dirty bandages. But worse than all of that were his eyes. Bora's eyes had always burned with fire and pride. Now they were empty, hollow, the eyes of someone who had seen too much death. He took 3 steps into the hall, then his legs gave out. Hana was the first to reach him. She caught him before he hit the ground. He was so heavy, even weak as he was, but she held him. She called for help. The elders rushed forward. Bora looked up at her. His lips moved. He was trying to speak. Hana leaned close. She heard him whisper, "They are all dead, all of them. I am the only one left." Then his eyes closed. The hall erupted in chaos. Elders shouted at each other. Young warriors who had stayed behind drew their weapons and looked around wildly, as if the enemy might appear at any moment. Someone was howling in grief. Someone else was crying. Pushed through the crowd, she saw her mate lying in Hana's arms, broken and bleeding. She saw his missing arm. She let out a sound that was not quite a howl and not quite a scream. It was the sound of a heart breaking. Hana held Bora. She could feel poison in his blood burning through his veins. The horde used venom on their blades. She had read about it. Without treatment, he would be dead before morning. The cubs, she suddenly remembered the cubs. The noise would have woken them. They would be scared. She looked around the hall at the chaos. The elders were arguing about what to do. The young warriors were panicking. Was on her knees beside her mate, unable to move. No one was in charge. No one was making decisions. And somewhere behind her, 37 cubs were waking up to the sound of their world falling apart. Hana made a choice. She called out in a loud, clear voice. She told 2 elders to take Bora to the medical chamber. She told another to go calm the cubs and keep them in the nursery. She told the young warriors to seal the gates and take positions on the walls. For a moment no one moved. They stared at her, this small human female, giving orders like an alpha. Then Elder, the oldest warrior in the den, nodded slowly. He began following her orders. The others followed his lead. Hana helped carry Bora to the medical chamber. She looked at his wounds and felt fear crawling up her spine. He was dying. The poison was killing him, and she was the only one who might know how to stop it. She sent for her medicines. She sent for clean water and bandages. She looked down at the broken alpha, the one who had mocked her and pushed her aside and called her worthless. He was still her brother, the only brother she had ever known. Hana took a deep breath. She pushed her fear down deep where it could not touch her. She had work to do. She would not let him die. Hana worked through the night. She cleaned Bora's wounds with water boiled with healing herbs. She stitched the cuts that were too deep to heal on their own. She made a paste from cave lichen and mountain moss, something she had learned from the old texts, and spread it over the worst injuries to fight infection. The poison was the hardest part. It had spread through his blood, making his heart beat too fast and his body burn with fever. Hana had read about this venom. The insects that made it used it to paralyze their prey before eating them alive. There was no cure, but there was a treatment. She took blood from 3 young warriors who volunteered. She put it into Bora slowly, carefully, replacing his poisoned blood with clean blood. It was dangerous. If she did it wrong, he would die. If she did it too slowly, the poison would kill him anyway. Hana did not sleep. She did not eat. She sat beside Bora and watched every breath he took. She changed his bandages. She checked his fever. She talked to him, even though he could not hear her. She told him about the cubs, how Little was finally learning to walk, how the twins and kept stealing food from the storage rooms, how the oldest cubs were practicing their first hunts with wooden prey. She told him about how strong his mate was being, how she was eating well and resting, keeping herself healthy for the cubs she carried. She told him about the pack, how everyone was scared but holding together, how the elders had stopped arguing and started working, how the young warriors stood watch on the walls without complaint. She told him to fight, to hold on, to come back to them. Outside the medical chamber, Hana had given orders that she had no right to give. She was not alpha, she was not even a warrior. She was a nursery keeper, a human, an outsider. But someone had to lead, and no one else was doing it. On the second day, Elder came to challenge her. He stood in the doorway of the medical chamber, his gray fur bristling with anger. He told Hana that she had gone too far. She was not pack, not truly. She could not give orders. She could not speak for the alpha. This was not their way. Hana did not look up from her work. She was changing Bora's bandages again. The wounds were starting to close, but slowly, too slowly. She asked what he would do instead. Would he take command? Would he lead the pack? Hesitated. He was old. His fighting days were behind him. He had wisdom, but he did not have the strength to be alpha. He knew it. Everyone knew it. Hana finally looked at him. She spoke the ancient words, the words from the old texts that no one remembered anymore. When the alpha falls and the pack scatters, any who holds the line may speak with the alpha's voice until dawn or death. Stared at her. Those words were from the first laws, written when they were young. He had never heard them spoken aloud. He did not know anyone still knew them. Hana told him that she had read every text in the old chambers. She knew their history better than any living. She knew their laws. And right now, she was holding the line. Was silent for a long moment. Then he lowered his head just slightly. It was not submission, it was respect. He asked her what she needed. Hana gave him a list. She needed food rationed so it would last. She needed the young warriors organized into shifts so they could rest. She needed scouts sent out to watch the mountain passes. She needed everyone to stay calm and work together. Took the list and left. On the third night, went into labor. The stress had pushed her body too far. The cubs were coming early. Hana heard the screams from down the corridor and ran. Was terrified. The birth was not going well. The first cub was stuck, unable to come out. They were panicking. Hana pushed through them. She told everyone to be quiet. She examined and saw the problem. The cub was turned wrong. It needed to be moved. She worked carefully, gently. She talked to in a soft voice, telling her to breathe, telling her everything would be okay. She turned the cub with her small, careful hands, hands that were too weak to fight but perfect for this. The first cub came out screaming, then the second, then the third, all healthy, all strong. Held her newborns and cried. She looked at Hana with something new in her eyes, not just gratitude, understanding. Hana went back to Bora. She had been away too long. She checked his fever and felt hope for the first time. It was going down. The days blurred together. Hana moved between the medical chamber and the nursery. She cared for Bora. She cared for the cubs. She answered questions from the elders. She made decisions that an alpha should make. The pack watched her. They saw this small, soft creature working harder than anyone. They saw her refuse to rest, refuse to eat, refuse to stop. They saw her holding everything together through pure will. They began to look at her differently. On the seventh day, Bora opened his eyes. He was weak, he could barely move, but he was alive. Hana was there when he woke. She gave him water and told him not to try to speak. She told him what had happened, how long he had been asleep, how she had treated his wounds. Bora looked at his left arm at the place where it ended. His face showed nothing. He had already known. He had felt them cut it off as he escaped. The pain had almost killed him. Hana told him about his cubs, 3 new lives born while he was dying. She told him they were healthy and beautiful and waiting to meet their father. For the first time since Hana had known him, Bora cried. Hana held his remaining hand. She did not say anything. Sometimes there was nothing to say. Then a young warrior burst into the chamber. His face was pale with fear. He said the scouts had returned. The scything horde was coming. They had followed Bora's trail through the mountains. They would arrive by dawn. Hana looked at Bora. He tried to rise but fell back, too weak to stand. She looked at the young warrior. She asked how many enemies were coming. 200, maybe more. Hana closed her eyes for just a moment. She thought about the pack, 6 old elders, 11 young warriors, 1 dying alpha, 1 mother with newborn cubs, 40 cubs who could not fight. And her. She opened her eyes. She told the warrior to gather everyone in the main hall. It was time to make a stand. The main hall was full of fear. Hana could smell it, even with her weak human nose. The elders stood in a tight group, their old bodies tense. The young warriors gripped their weapons so hard their claws dug into the handles. Sat in the corner, holding her 3 newborns against her chest, her eyes never leaving the door. Hana stood before them all. She was smaller than the smallest cub. She had no claws, no fangs, no fur to keep out the cold. She looked like prey standing before predators. But when she spoke, everyone listened. She told them the truth. The horde was coming. 200 enemies against their handful of defenders. By every measure they should lose. They should die. She told them she did not plan to die. Elder stepped forward. He said they should flee. The back tunnels led to the deep caves. They could take the cubs and hide. Maybe the horde would not find them. Hana shook her head. She told him what she knew from the old texts. The horde were hunters. They tracked prey by scent and heat. Running would only make them easier to catch. In the open tunnels, with cubs slowing them down and too weak to run and Bora unable to move, the horde would catch them before they made it halfway. Their only chance was to hold the den. The walls were strong. The gates were thick. If they could make the attack too costly, the horde might decide to leave and find easier prey. One of the young warriors laughed, but there was no humor in it. He said 200 against 17. Even with walls, they would be overrun. They might kill 10, maybe 20. Then they would die. Hana looked at him. She asked him if he had ever heard of the human. The warrior had not. None of them had. Humans were rare in this part of space. Most had never seen one except for Hana. Hana told them about Earth, a world where humans were not the strongest creatures. They were not the fastest. They had no claws, no venom, no armor. Every day something tried to kill them. Predators, disease, weather, other humans. Humans should have gone extinct 1,000 times, but they did not. She told them the secret of her people. Humans did not know how to give up. They looked at death and said no. They looked at impossible odds and found a way. They were stubborn and clever and too stupid to know when they were beaten. Hana looked at each defender in turn. She told them that tonight they would not be facing the horde. They would be human. They would refuse to die. They would find a way. And if they could not find a way, they would make one. Elder was the first to howl. It was an old howl, a war howl, something the pack had not heard in many cycles. One by one, the others joined him. even the young warriors, even holding her cubs. Hana did not howl, she did not know how, but she smiled and that was enough. They had until dawn. Hana put them to work. She had read the old texts. She knew how to defend a position against greater numbers. She knew tricks that they had forgotten, strategies from wars fought long ago. She had the warriors pile furniture against the outer gates to slow the enemy. She had them dig pits in the courtyard and cover them with snow. She had them pour water on the walls so it would freeze into ice, making them harder to climb. She found the oil stores and had them carried to the walls. When the horde came, they would pour the oil and light it. Fire was one thing the insects feared. She made spears from anything she could find. Broken furniture, tool handles, even old bones from the storage rooms. Every cub old enough to hold a weapon got one. They would not fight in the front lines, but if the enemy reached the nursery, they would have something to defend themselves. She went to Bora last. He was awake, watching her through the doorway of the medical chamber. He asked her when she became a war leader. Hana told him she read a lot of books. Bora laughed. It hurt him, she could see that, but he laughed anyway. He told her that was right about her. She was Pack, real Pack. Hana felt tears in her eyes, but she did not let them fall. She told Bora to rest. He would need his strength. He asked her what for. He could not fight. He could barely stand. Hana told him that sometimes just standing was enough. The night passed too quickly. Hana climbed to the top of the outer wall as the first light of dawn touched the mountains. She looked out at the white landscape, at the snow and ice and frozen trees. She saw them coming. The horde moved like a shadow across the snow. 200 bodies, maybe more, their hard shells glinting in the early light. They made a sound as they moved, a clicking and buzzing that grew louder as they came closer. Elder climbed up beside her. He was too old to feel fear anymore, or maybe he had just accepted what was coming. He told Hana that he had lived a long life. He had seen many things. He never thought he would die fighting beside a human. Hana asked him if that was a bad thing. Thought about it, then he said no. He said it was a good thing, a strange thing but good. Hana looked at the approaching enemy. She thought about the cubs behind her, 40 small lives depending on her. She thought about the newborns. She thought about Bora, broken but alive. She was scared. She would not lie about that. Her heart was beating so fast it hurt. Her hands were shaking. Every part of her wanted to run, to hide, to find a safe place and curl up until the danger passed. But there was no safe place. There was nowhere to hide. The only way those cubs survived was if someone stood between them and the enemy. Hana was that someone. She drew the blade she had taken from the armory. It was too big for her, made for hands. She could barely lift it, but she held it anyway. The horde stopped at the base of the hill. They looked up at the walls. Hana knew they were counting defenders, measuring strength, calculating how quickly they could win. The horde commander stepped forward. It was taller than the others, with a red stripe across its shell. It spoke in a clicking voice that somehow formed words. It told them to surrender, give up the cubs. They would die, but the human could go free. The horde had no interest in her kind. Hana looked down at the commander. She felt something change inside her. The fear was still there, but something else was growing beside it, something hot and sharp and angry. She raised her blade. She told the horde that these were her cubs, her pack, her family. Anyone who wanted them would have to go through her. The horde commander tilted its head, confused. This tiny creature challenging 200 warriors. Then it gave the order to attack. The battle for the den had begun. The horde hit the outer wall like a wave hitting rock. They climbed over each other, their blade arms slashing at the ice-covered stone. The defenders poured burning oil down on them, and the screams of dying insects filled the air. Hana fought beside the warriors. She was not strong, but she was clever. She used her small size to dodge attacks that would have killed a larger fighter. She stabbed at joints and eyes, the weak points in the Horde's armor. She shouted orders, directing the defenders to where they were needed most. Elder fell first. A Horde warrior made it over the wall and drove its blade through his chest. The old warrior died with his claws around his enemy's throat, taking his killer with him. Hana saw him fall. She wanted to stop, to mourn, to scream, but she could not. The fight was not over. The outer wall held for 2 hours, then it fell. The defenders fell back to the inner courtyard. The pits Hana had dug claimed a dozen more enemies, insects falling into holes filled with sharpened stakes. The narrow passages between buildings became death traps, where the Horde's numbers meant nothing and they could fight one at a time. But there were too many, always too many. By midday, half the defenders were dead or wounded. The survivors had been pushed back to the inner hall, the last line before the nursery. Hana stood at the center, her blade broken, her body covered in cuts and bruises. She had killed 5 of the enemy herself. She did not know how. She only knew that every time one came at her, she found a way to make it stop. The young warriors formed a line around her. Only 4 were still standing. Their eyes were wild with fear and exhaustion, but they held their positions. Behind them, the nursery door was sealed. 40 cubs waited inside, was with them, protecting her newborns. The Horde gathered at the entrance to the inner hall. They had won. They knew it. They were just deciding how to finish it. The commander stepped forward again. Its red stripe was darker now, wet with the blood of warriors. It clicked its approval at the fight they had given. Worthy prey, it said, but prey nonetheless. It gave Hana one more chance. Walk away, leave the cubs live. Hana could barely stand. Her legs were shaking. Her arms felt like they were made of stone. Blood ran down her face from a cut on her forehead. She raised what was left of her blade. She said no. The commander tilted its head again. It seemed almost impressed by this tiny creature that would not break. Then a sound came from behind Hana, a groaning of metal. The nursery door was opening. Hana spun around. She saw Bora. He stood in the doorway. He should not have been able to stand at all. His left arm was gone. His wounds had barely started to heal. His face was gray with pain and exhaustion. But he was standing. His eyes were not empty anymore. They burned with the fire of an alpha defending his pack. He walked forward. Every step looked like it might be his last. He reached Hana and put his remaining hand on her shoulder to steady himself. He looked at the Horde commander. He spoke in a voice that was barely a whisper, but somehow it carried across the silent hall. He said, "You want my cubs? Come and take them." The commander paused. It looked at the broken alpha. It looked at the human holding him up. It looked at the 4 young warriors who refused to run. Then it saw movement behind them. The nursery door was open wide now, and coming through it were the cubs. All 40 of them. The oldest ones came first, holding the little spears Hana had made for them. Their hands were shaking, but they held their weapons up. Behind them came the younger ones, some of them barely old enough to walk. They clustered around Hana's legs, grabbing her clothes, pressing against her. Came last. She held her 3 newborns in one arm. In the other she held a blade. Her golden fur was bristling, her fangs bared. The pack stood together. The broken alpha, the human who would not break, the warriors who would not run, the mate who would not hide, and 40 cubs who had followed their nursery keeper into battle. Hana felt a strange calm settle over her. She had done everything she could. They all had. If this was the end, at least they would face it together. The Horde commander was silent for a long moment. It looked at the defenders. It looked at the cubs. It calculated losses. It measured costs. 200 warriors against this handful. Easy victory. But how many would die taking it? How many more would die from wounds afterward? And for what? 40 cubs that would take years to grow big enough to eat. The commander made a sound, a series of clicks that echoed through the hall. The horde turned and left. Hana watched them go. She watched until the last one disappeared through the broken gates. She watched until the sound of their clicking faded into silence. Then her legs gave out. She sat on the cold floor of the inner hall, surrounded by cubs. They crawled into her lap, pressed against her sides, buried their faces in her clothes. They were crying, all of them, releasing the fear they had held inside. Hana held as many as she could. She stroked their fur and whispered that they were safe. It was over. They were safe. Bora collapsed beside her. He did not have the strength to sit up, so he lay on the floor, his head resting against her knee. He was crying too, not from pain, from something else. He told Hana he was sorry for everything, for all the years of cruelty, for pushing her aside, for not seeing what had seen. Hana ran her fingers through his silver fur. She told him it was okay. They were family. Families fought. Families forgave. She told him to rest now. She would watch over them. She always had. The days after the battle were hard. They buried their dead, including Elder. They repaired the walls and gates. They mourned and healed and tried to find their way forward. Bora recovered slowly. He would never fight again, not the way he used to. His left arm was gone forever, but he was still Alpha. He was still Pack. 1 month after the battle, he called a gathering. Every surviving member of the pack came to the main hall. The cubs sat in the front, as they always did for important announcements. Bora stood before them. He was thinner now, still weak, but his eyes were clear and his voice was strong. He spoke about the battle, about the enemy they had faced, about the defenders who had given their lives. Then he spoke about Hana. He told them what she had done, how she had saved his life, how she had led the pack when no one else could, how she had stood before 200 enemies and refused to move. He called her forward. Hana walked to the front of the hall. The cubs cheered. The warriors stamped their feet. Even holding her 3 newborns was smiling. Bora performed the old ceremony, the one from the first laws. He named Hana Pack Sister, a title that had never been given to anyone outside the. He gave her the right to speak in council, to own territory, to raise cubs of her own if she chose. But more than that, he asked her to teach. He asked her to share what she knew, the old texts, the medicine, the strategies, all the things she had learned that the had forgotten. Hana accepted, of course she accepted. This was her home, these were her people. In the years that followed, the pack changed. Cubs learned medicine alongside hunting. They learned strategy alongside combat. They learned to read the old texts and remember their own history. And every cub grew up hearing the story of the night the horde came. The night the Alpha returned wounded and could not stand. The night a human woman stood before the nursery door with a broken blade and 40 cubs gathered behind her. The night she said, "Not my pack, not today." The night that proved strength was not about claws or fangs or size. True strength was in the one who refused to give up. True strength was in the one who stood when others fell. True strength was Hana. And she was Pack. Real Pack. Forever.